You have felt it, have you not? That curious deflation when you share a cherished plan and immediately the doubts begin to crowd in, the well-meaning friend who explains why it cannot be done, the colleague who has heard of someone who tried and failed, the family member who suggests a more realistic approach. Within moments, your certainty has been transformed into doubt, your energy dissipated in explanation rather than directed toward execution. This is no accident. It is a pattern as old as human nature itself. When you announce your ambitions, you do not inspire universal support. You activate in others a curious mixture of envy, doubt, and unconscious hostility. They will not say, "I hope you fail." Such naked malice is rare. Rather, they will offer realistic assessments, cite cautionary tales, and subtly poison your resolve with the venom of their own abandoned dreams. I have witnessed this phenomenon countless times, and I have learned its antidote: strategic silence. The moment you speak your ambition, you transform it from private certainty into public debate. You surrender authority over your own future to a court that is neither wise nor merciful. But there is another way, the way of the man who speaks through deeds rather than words, who presents achievements rather than promises, who bypasses preventative judgment and appeals directly to accomplished reality. The paradox that rules achievement. I have observed, during 60 years navigating the treacherous waters of public life, a paradox that would confound the casual observer. The man who speaks least of his endeavors often accomplishes most, whilst he who broadcasts every intention finds himself perpetually frustrated, his plans scattered like chaff before the wind. This is not coincidence, nor superstition, but immutable principle, as certain as gravity, as predictable as the tides. Consider the general who telegraphs his battle plans to the enemy before marching. We would rightly call such a man a fool. Yet in our personal affairs, in the prosecution of our ambitions, in the quiet cultivation of our dreams, we commit this very folly daily. We speak when we ought to remain silent. We share when we ought to conceal. We invite judgment when we require only action. I learned this truth not in the halls of Parliament, nor in the pages of philosophy, but in the unforgiving crucible of experience. During those long years between 1929 and 1939, what some have called my wilderness years, I toiled in relative obscurity whilst others doubted my warnings about the German menace. Had I announced every effort, seeking approval for every insight into Hitler's intentions, I should have been talked out of my convictions 1,000 times over. The mob does not reward the prophet, it stones him. Instead, I wrote histories whilst the fashionable dismissed me. I studied the threat whilst the comfortable laughed. I prepared myself in silence whilst the powerful ignored me. When the hour finally came, when the nation required leadership in its darkest moment, I was ready. Not because I had discussed my preparation endlessly, but because I had actually prepared. Silence enabled readiness. Explanation would have prevented it. This chapter reveals why silence functions not merely as the absence of communication, but as communication's highest strategic form. You will understand that every word spoken about unfinished work costs you tangible power, power that might have been directed toward completion. By chapter's end, you will see your own pattern of premature revelation and grasp its true cost. For 1 week, I charge you with this task. Note every time you speak of future plans, unfinished work, or unexecuted intentions. Simply observe without judgment. You will be astonished by the sheer volume. Each instance represents energy bled away, authority surrendered, advantage squandered. Awareness precedes transformation. Human beings possess finite energy, physical, mental, emotional. Each explanation of your plans discharges this energy through the mouth rather than directing it through the hands. Speaking about writing a book provides counterfeit satisfaction that makes actual writing less urgent. This is not metaphor but mechanism. The energy that should flow into your work instead dissipates into the air as words, words, words. Before speaking of any plan, apply this simple test. Would I announce this strategy if I were a general facing an enemy? If the answer is no, silence yourself. Your competitors, doubters, and the merely curious are indeed your enemies, not from malice, but from the natural operation of human nature. They need not wish you harm to harm you. Their mere awareness of your plans alters the strategic landscape to your disadvantage. Examine any great achievement in history, military victories, scientific breakthroughs. artistic masterworks. None were accomplished by committee consultation. All emerged from sovereign minds working in discretion. Wellington did not poll his officers on whether Waterloo was winnable. Nelson did not seek approval before Trafalgar. They decided, they acted, they presented the world with facts. The discussion came after, when success rendered objections moot. Tomorrow morning, before you speak to anyone, identify one current project or ambition. Commit to keeping it entirely private for the next 7 days. When others ask, "What are you working on?" respond simply, "Various matters," or "It proceeds." Notice the internal pressure to elaborate, feel it, acknowledge it, resist it. This discomfort is productive. It signals that you are breaking a deeply ingrained pattern. During these 7 days, pour into execution every ounce of energy you would have spent in explanation. At week's end, assess your progress. You will discover that the project has advanced further in silent execution than in months of public discussion. This single experiment proves the principle more powerfully than any argument could. After this chapter, you see your words differently, no longer harmless sharing but strategic decisions with real consequences. You recognize the pattern you've repeated for years, dissipating power through premature revelation. This awareness itself changes behavior. You become conscious of what was unconscious, deliberate about what was reflexive. You understand why some succeed where you've struggled. The playing field levels not when circumstances change, but when you stop handicapping yourself through explanation. The choice becomes visible. The choice becomes yours. Why good people unknowingly sabotage your dreams? Human nature contains a truth most refuse to acknowledge. When you announce your intentions, you do not inspire universal support. Instead, you activate a mixture of doubt, jealousy, and unconscious hostility, even in people who genuinely wish you well. This uncomfortable reality must be faced squarely if you are to protect yourself against it. The mechanism operates beneath conscious awareness, which makes it all the more insidious. Most people carry the weight of their own abandoned dreams. Your announced ambition unconsciously reminds them of their own inaction. They must then choose. Either support your attempt, which admits their own surrender was unnecessary, or discourage you, which validates their own choices. Psychology predicts the latter. They will not say, "I hope you fail," such naked malice is rare. Instead, they offer realistic assessments, cite cautionary tales, and subtly poison your resolve with concerns dressed as wisdom. I witnessed this phenomenon clearly during my years of public service. A young officer of promising ability announced his intention to enter politics. Within days, a chorus of well-meaning advisers descended upon him. The timing was wrong, they said. His connections were insufficient, the path too difficult, his talents better suited elsewhere. These were not malicious men. I knew several personally. They genuinely believed they offered sound counsel, yet every word drained his resolve like blood from an opened vein. Within a month, his ambition had been talked away. He remained in the military, performed adequately, retired without distinction. Years later, discussing that turning point over brandy, he said with visible regret, "I wish I had simply done it without consulting anyone." So do I wish that for him. The abandoned dreams filter operates automatically. When you announce your ambitions, you unconsciously challenge others' rationalizations for their own abandonments. This is not speculation but observable pattern. Learn to distinguish genuine warnings from disguised discouragement. Ask yourself, does this person possess specific expertise relevant to my endeavor? Have they accomplished something similar? Do they have actual stake in my success? If the answer to these questions is no, their concerns are projections, not prophecy. I charge you with identifying the 1 to 3 people who genuinely support your success, not those who say they do, but those who demonstrate it through action. Share only with them, and sparingly even then. All others operate from their own psychological needs, not your interests. This is not cynicism but realism. Most people mean well. Their discouragement flows not from malice but from their own limitations. The mistake is expecting them to transcend these limitations. Consider also the delayed announcement strategy. Complete significant portions before announcing anything. By then, momentum makes you unstoppable. Others' doubts cannot derail a train already moving at speed. The man who announces his intention to write a book invites 1,000 objections. The man who presents a completed manuscript silences them all. When you next encounter the urge to share a new ambition, conduct this mental exercise. Visualize announcing it to your usual confidants. Imagine their exact responses, the subtle reservations, the "have you considered" questions, the cautionary tales. Feel how these responses would affect your resolve. Now imagine accomplishing the goal in silence and announcing only completion. Notice the difference in energy. This visualization clarifies what actual announcement obscures, that you gain nothing from premature revelation and risk everything. Armed with this clarity, you can choose silence confidently, knowing you're not being secretive but strategic, not antisocial but wise to human nature's operation. Here is a revealing exercise. Write down a current ambition. Below it, list 5 people you'd normally tell. For each, honestly predict their likely response. Most discover that only 1 or 2 would offer unqualified support. The others would raise concerns, suggest modifications, or offer cautionary tales. This exercise reveals that you already know who undermines versus supports you. You've simply been ignoring this knowledge. Stop ignoring it. Do not mistake this teaching for cynicism. True friends support your ultimate welfare, which sometimes means questioning unwise plans. Learn to distinguish between wisdom and projection. The difference shows in whether counsel empowers or paralyzes. Wisdom strengthens your resolve whilst refining your approach. Projection weakens your will whilst validating the counselor's choices. After this chapter, you no longer feel betrayed by others' discouragement. You expect it, understand it, and shield yourself from it. You stop seeking validation from those incapable of providing it. Your relationships improve because you cease demanding what others cannot give. You identify the rare, genuine supporters and treasure them appropriately. Most liberating, you realize that others' limitations need not limit you. Their doubt becomes irrelevant. Your path clears. The counterfeit satisfaction that kills ambition. The human brain contains a peculiar design flaw that few recognize and fewer still guard against. Speaking about an endeavor creates psychological satisfaction similar to actual accomplishment. The man who describes his future novel feels, for precious moments, like an author. The woman who discusses her business plan experiences counterfeit achievement. This represents catastrophic self-sabotage. You discharge your energy in words, receiving the reward without doing the work. The very hunger that ought to drive action becomes satisfied through explanation. The mechanism operates at neurological level, which makes intellectual awareness your only defense. I have observed 2 men of similar capability whose fates diverged dramatically. The first attended every dinner party, eloquently describing his forthcoming historical analysis of the Indian question. His command of detail was impressive, his passion evident. I myself found his proposed thesis intriguing, yet years passed without publication. The second man I saw rarely at social gatherings. He declined invitations, pleading work. His conversation, when forced, remained vague about his projects. Suddenly, without warning, a masterful 3-volume study appeared, comprehensive, original, definitive. The difference was not talent but psychology. One man experienced the reward through discussion, the other reserved that pleasure for completion. One talked himself satisfied, the other worked himself accomplished. Your brain's reward system cannot distinguish between planning and doing. This system evolved in an environment where planning and doing occurred close together. You planned the hunt, then hunted. Modern world allows endless planning without doing, creating satisfaction without achievement. Discussing your novel triggers similar dopamine release as actually writing it. This satisfied state then reduces motivation to do the actual work. You've received the psychological payoff prematurely. The remedy lies in hunger preservation. Keep yourself hungry for the goal by denying yourself the satisfaction of discussion. Each time you resist explaining your project, you preserve and intensify the desire that fuels execution. This accumulated hunger becomes irresistible creative force. Think of it as a dam. Water stored generates power. Water spilled accomplishes nothing. Many believe discussing plans relieves pressure. Helpfully, I tell you, the reverse is true. Discussing plans releases the pressure that should drive action. You want that pressure building, demanding release through execution, not dissipating through explanation. The pressure is not your enemy but your engine. Do not vent what should propel you forward. Celebrate only completed stages, never planned stages. This trains your reward system correctly. Pleasure follows achievement, not intention. Over time, you become psychologically incapable of satisfaction from mere planning. The mechanism requires repetition to establish, but once established, it operates automatically. The next time you feel compelled to discuss an unfinished project, physically redirect that energy. If you would have spent 30 minutes explaining your plans at dinner, spend those 30 minutes actually working on the project instead. Make this substitution conscious and deliberate. Feel the energy that would have gone towards speech flowing into action. This physical redirection teaches at a level deeper than intellectual understanding. Your body learns what your mind might debate. After several such redirections, you develop an almost physical aversion to premature discussion, not from discipline but from experiential understanding that explanation costs you concrete progress. The shift from external control to internal alignment marks genuine transformation. Some misunderstand this teaching as advocating joyless solitude. Not so. The principle concerns unfinished work requiring your full energy. Once you complete significant milestones, appropriate celebration and sharing follow naturally, but guard the work itself jealously until completion. Another distinction requires clarity. Consulting genuine experts differs entirely from seeking validation from casual acquaintances. Asking an editor's opinion on your completed manuscript advances the work. Describing your unfinished book to dinner companions dissipates energy. The distinction is clear if you examine your honest motivation for speaking. Am I seeking knowledge that advances this work, or approval that merely satisfies my ego? Answer, honestly, act accordingly. For 2 weeks, I charge you with this practice. Every time you feel the urge to discuss an unfinished project, immediately invest that exact amount of time into working on it instead. Keep a log. Would have discussed for 20 minutes, worked for 20 minutes instead. Track cumulative hours redirected. Most discover they've reclaimed 10 to 15 hours of productive time hours that would have been wasted on explanation. After this chapter, you recognize the urge to discuss unfinished work for what it is, psychological self-sabotage. You no longer indulge this urge unconsciously. You understand that the pressure to share is not signal to speak, but signal to work. The energy-seeking release should flow into execution, not explanation. Your relationship with your own ambitions transforms. You become their guardian, not their broadcaster. This shift from public proclamation to private dedication marks the beginning of serious achievement. Work in private obscurity until you have something undeniable to show. Then and only then present it to the world. Let the work speak for itself. It will speak with authority your explanations never could. Information asymmetry, the invisible hierarchy. In every negotiation, every competition, every human relationship, a fundamental truth operates with mathematical precision. The person who knows more whilst revealing less occupies the commanding position. This is not manipulation but mechanics. Information itself functions as currency, and unequal information creates hierarchy as reliably as unequal force creates motion. When you announce your plans, you surrender your primary strategic asset, the advantage of surprise, the leverage of uncertainty, the power of unequal knowledge, all forfeit in a moment of premature revelation. This chapter establishes the first philosophical foundation that silence creates power, not merely by avoiding weakness, but by actively generating advantage. My escape from Boer captivity in Pretoria illustrates this principle with uncommon clarity. Captured whilst working as war correspondent, I found myself imprisoned with other British officers. I might have announced my escape plans to fellow prisoners, seeking their approval or assistance. Many would have counseled caution. Some might have discouraged the attempt entirely. At minimum, discussion would have introduced complexity and delay. Instead, I kept my own counsel. I watched the guards' patterns. I noted the prison's weaknesses. I waited for the propitious moment. When it came, I acted. No debate, no committee, no vote. I simply vaulted the wall and vanished into the South African darkness. Had I discussed my intentions, several catastrophes might have followed. Other prisoners, with best intentions, might have talked me out of the attempt. The guards might have learned of my plans through careless conversation or deliberate betrayal. My fellow prisoners might have insisted on modifications that would have compromised the plan's simplicity and effectiveness. By maintaining absolute informational advantage, I transformed impossible circumstances into opportunity. The guards knew nothing. I knew everything. That asymmetry opened the prison gate more effectively than any key. In military affairs, surprise multiplies force effectiveness by factors of 3 to 5. The same mathematics governs personal ambitions. When you act from silence, opposition cannot prepare defenses, competitors cannot position against you, doubters cannot mobilize obstacles. You act, they react. Initiative belongs to the silent actor. Consider the uncertainty leverage. When others don't know your plans, they must prepare for multiple possibilities. This disperses their resources whilst yours remain concentrated. Strategic ambiguity exhausts opposition. Clarity invites focused resistance. The general who reveals his main effort enables the enemy to concentrate forces against it. The man who announces his business strategy enables competitors to position against it. Regularly assess what you know versus what you've revealed. The gap between these represents your strategic advantage. Narrow this gap carelessly, and you forfeit power. Maintain it zealously, and you preserve initiative. Think of information as ammunition. Once fired, it cannot be recalled. Its power transfers to whoever receives it. When you must share information, and sometimes you must control timing and completeness. Reveal only what advances your purposes, only when revelation serves your interests, only to audiences requiring that knowledge. Never explain comprehensively when partial disclosure suffices. The poker player who reveals his hand forfeits advantage. The principle extends perfectly to life's greater games. Before discussing any plan, ask 3 questions. Does this person need this information to help me? Will revealing this information alter their behavior in ways that serve my interests? Or am I speaking merely to satisfy my ego? Brutal honesty here is essential. If you answer the 3rd question affirmatively, stop speaking. This simple filter, applied consistently, preserves your informational advantage in most situations. Practice this interrogation until it becomes automatic, a mental checkpoint you pass through before every revelation. Within weeks, you will notice that you speak less, accomplish more, and encounter less resistance. The correlation is not coincidental but causal. Do not confuse strategic discretion with pathological secrecy. Information shared appropriately with genuine collaborators advances purposes. The error is indiscriminate revelation to audiences lacking legitimate need for that knowledge. Neither should you assume silence makes you mysterious or interesting. Silence serves function, not image. Its power lies in preserving advantage, not cultivating persona. Finally, never lie when questioned. Deflection and partial truth suffice without sacrificing integrity. It proceeds. Various matters. I shall show you when complete. These responses acknowledge the question without providing substance for discussion. The questioner feels heard. You reveal nothing actionable. After this chapter, you view information itself differently, not as neutral fact but as tradable asset. You recognize that every revelation alters the strategic landscape. You understand that the question is never, should I share this, but rather, does sharing this serve my purposes? You cease answering questions simply because they were asked. You evaluate each revelation's strategic value before speaking. This transforms you from passive communicator to strategic actor. You no longer scatter your ammunition indiscriminately. You husband your resources, deploying them only when deployment advances your position. This shift from reflexive revelation to calculated disclosure marks the beginning of strategic mastery. Information asymmetry creates hierarchy. Maintain your advantage, the economics of your most precious resource. Human attention is finite, precious, and tragically squandered. You possess approximately 16 waking hours daily, perhaps 40 years of focused productivity if fortunate. Each moment spent explaining your plans is a moment stolen from executing them. Worse still, explanation invites into your mind the doubts, objections, and limitations of others. These become like termites in the structure of your determination. This chapter establishes the 2nd philosophical foundation. Attention operates according to economic principles of scarcity and allocation. The sovereign actor understands that attention is a non-renewable resource requiring ruthless allocation. You cannot reclaim spent attention. Every explanation purchases momentary social comfort at the cost of irrecoverable time and corrupted focus. During the writing of The World Crisis, my 6-volume account of the Great War, I did not discuss interpretations before completing them. I did not solicit opinions on unfinished chapters. I did not explain my approach to preliminary critics. I simply wrote, day after day, during the quiet hours of morning when the mind is freshest and the world makes fewest demands. When I finally published the work, it stood on its own merit. The completed volumes answered questions my explanations never could. Had I spent those thousands of hours explaining my approach to skeptics, the work would remain unwritten. The mathematics are brutally simple. Time spent explaining cannot be spent executing. I chose execution. The completed work vindicated that choice more eloquently than any defense I might have offered in advance. You have roughly 3 to 4 hours of peak cognitive performance daily. Spending even 30 minutes explaining plans consumes 12 to 15% of your daily cognitive budget. Compound this daily, and you've squandered 25 to 40% of your yearly cognitive capacity on explanation rather than execution. The numbers are staggering when calculated honestly. Each doubt, objection, or concern someone introduces becomes a termite gnawing at your determination. You cannot unhear their reservations. Their limitations become your preoccupations. You must then expend additional energy defending your choices to yourself, energy that should flow into the work itself. Guard your mental architecture jealously. Discussion introduces complexity, alternatives, modifications. Your crisp vision becomes muddied by others' input. What was clear becomes confused. Maintaining pristine focus requires isolation from well-meaning contaminators. This is not arrogance but necessity. The painter does not invite a committee to debate each brushstroke. The general does not poll his army before battle. Explaining requires marshalling arguments, anticipating objections, managing others' reactions. This cognitive labor exhausts you. Better to reserve that energy for the work itself. Time spent executing compounds in value. Small daily progress accumulates into substantial achievement. Time spent explaining produces 0 compound returns. It's spent and gone, like water poured onto sand. Conduct this calculation with ruthless honesty. Estimate how many hours weekly you currently spend discussing plans, explaining strategies, seeking approval for unexecuted intentions. Include casual conversations, social media posts, emails seeking validation. Most discover they spend 5 to 10 hours weekly. Multiply by 52 weeks, 260 to 520 hours annually. That represents 6 to 13 full work weeks. Now imagine redirecting those hours into actual execution of your ambitions. What could you accomplish with an additional 6 to 13 weeks of focused work yearly? The answer clarifies why some achieve vastly more than others. Of equal talent, they allocate their attention to execution rather than explanation. Make this calculation viscerally real. Let the numbers shock you into different behavior. Let them reveal the magnitude of your current waste. For 7 consecutive days, track every instance where you discuss unfinished plans. Note the time spent. Even brief conversations count. Calculate weekly total, multiply by 52 for annual estimate. Most discover they waste 200 to 400 hours yearly. This stark number, representing 5 to 10 weeks of full-time work, typically shocks readers into behavioral change more effectively than any argument. Some confuse this teaching with absolute isolation, refusing all conversation. Not so. Strategic collaboration and necessary coordination remain valid. The error is undisciplined revelation to audiences providing no genuine value. Another mistake. Assuming you can make up wasted attention time later. You cannot. Time and attention are non-renewable. Each hour squandered discussing plans is gone forever. Finally, recognize that the psychological cost of explanation, the contamination of your focus, often exceeds even the temporal cost. The termites do more damage than the time theft. They undermine the structure from within, weakening what should stand strong. After this chapter, you experience almost physical pain when wasting attention on explanation. You viscerally understand opportunity cost, that every minute explaining is a minute not executing. You become ruthless in protecting your cognitive budget. You view your attention as you would view money, a limited resource requiring strategic allocation. This transforms you from spendthrift to miser regarding your most precious asset. You cease scattering your hours like coins tossed to beggars. You husband them, deploy them, invest them where they compound. The shift produces immediate, measurable results. We have established two foundations: information as strategic asset, attention as precious resource. The third principle completes the philosophical architecture. It explains why silence ultimately proves not merely tactically advantageous but philosophically superior. To that final foundation we now turn: the unanswerable authority of accomplished facts. Achievement creates its own authority. When you complete a thing, you present the world with a fact. Facts cannot be argued with, they can only be accepted. But intentions, plans, dreams, these can be debated endlessly, diminished, dismissed. This chapter establishes the third and final philosophical foundation. Accomplished reality possesses authority that announced intention never achieves. By remaining silent until the deed is done, you bypass the court of preventative opinion and appeal directly to the court of accomplished reality. This distinction separates the talker from the doer, the promiser from the achiever, the aspirant from the victor. History records no debates about what might be done, only facts about what was done. In May 1940, I assumed the premiership under circumstances so grave that some doubted whether Britain could survive the month. I did not convene endless conferences to discuss whether we should fight or negotiate with Hitler. I did not commission studies on whether resistance was feasible. I did not poll the cabinet on whether to continue. I simply declared we should fight, then set about the practical business of fighting. Had I spent those precious weeks explaining to doubters why we might prevail, Hitler would have been in London before the debate concluded. I presented Parliament and the nation with a fact: we were fighting. This fact possessed authority no amount of preliminary discussion could have generated. Intention exists only in your mind. Facts exist in the world. Intentions require belief. Facts require only perception. When you present a completed work, you eliminate the need for others to believe in your capability, you demonstrate it. This shifts the burden of proof from you to reality itself. Before completion, you require permission, approval, validation. You stand as supplicant before the court of opinion. After completion, others must justify their rejection of your work, and rejection of demonstrated achievement is far more difficult than skepticism about announced intention. Completion reverses the power dynamic entirely. Visualize two courts. In one, you argue for permission to attempt something. You must convince skeptical judges that you possess the ability, that circumstances favor success, that the endeavor merits undertaking. The burden rests upon you. Rejection is easy. In the other court, you present evidence of having done it. The completed work stands before them, undeniable. They can only evaluate what you've already accomplished. They cannot deny what demonstrably exists. Always appeal to the second court. Work in private, complete the stage fully, then present it. This generates momentum and credibility simultaneously. Others see you deliver on promises because you only promise what you've already accomplished. Reorganize your relationship with the world around this principle. Speak only of completed work, never of intended work. When asked about future plans, deflect with practiced ease. I shall show you when it's complete. When questioned about current projects, respond simply, it proceeds. Then, when you finish, only then present the completed work without preamble or excuse. Let the work speak for itself. It will speak with authority your advance explanations never could. This simple shift from announcing intentions to revealing accomplishments transforms how others perceive and respond to you. They cease seeing you as aspirant, requiring their validation. They begin seeing you as achiever, presenting results. The perception shift alters everything. Respect flows toward demonstrated capacity, not declared intention. Become someone who delivers rather than discusses. For 30 days, I charge you with this practice. Speak only about completed work, never about intended work. When tempted to discuss plans, remind yourself with these words: I will show them, not tell them. Keep a private log of completed items you would previously have discussed before finishing. At month's end, present several completed projects simultaneously. Observe how others' responses differ from their typical reactions to your announced intentions. The contrast teaches more powerfully than any argument could. Do not confuse this teaching with perfectionism that prevents ever sharing anything. The principle concerns sharing completed stages rather than incomplete plans, not demanding flawlessness before revelation. Another error, assuming silence about intentions means lying when questioned. Deflection suffices admirably. I'm exploring various approaches, answers honestly without revealing substance. Finally, recognize that some will accuse you of being secretive. Accept this accusation with calm indifference. The accomplished fact you eventually present answers all such criticisms more eloquently than any defense. After this chapter, you understand why the silent achiever possesses authority the vocal aspirant lacks. You recognize that accomplishment itself is the ultimate argument. No words you could speak beforehand equal the power of the finished work. You cease seeking permission through explanation and begin presenting completion. This transforms your entire approach to ambition, from requesting validation to demonstrating capacity, from promising to delivering. Strategic communication versus vain explanation. Not all communication is created equal. A fundamental distinction exists between strategic communication, which advances your purposes, and vain explanation, which merely dissipates energy. This chapter provides the conceptual tools to distinguish these categories with ruthless clarity. Strategic communication includes directing subordinates, coordinating with genuine allies, fulfilling obligations, teaching proven methods. Vain explanation includes seeking approval before action, broadcasting unfinished work, explaining plans to satisfy curiosity, justifying decisions to those lacking legitimate stake. Mastery lies not in universal silence, but in discriminating judgment. The sovereign actor speaks when speaking serves, remains silent when silence empowers. I have known two men of remarkably similar talent and opportunity whose fates diverged dramatically. Man A attended every gathering, eloquently explaining his latest venture, seeking validation before action. His conversations sparkled with plans, schemes, possibilities. Over 20 years, he remained perpetually on the verge of greatness, always promising, never delivering. Man B I rarely heard speak of his affairs. When forced to conversation, he deflected skillfully. Years would pass in silence, then suddenly one learned he had completed remarkable works, a business launched, a book published, a position achieved. The world discovered his accomplishments only after they stood completed. The difference lay entirely in their relationship with communication. Man A treated ambitions as things to be discussed, Man B treated his as things to be done. One dissipated energy through explanation, the other concentrated it through execution. Before speaking of any plan, apply this three-part filter with unwavering discipline. First, does this person need this information to help me? Second, will revealing this advance my purposes? Third, or am I speaking merely to satisfy ego? If you answer the third question affirmatively, stop speaking immediately. This filter, applied consistently, eliminates perhaps 80% of vain explanation. The discipline transforms behavior within weeks. Distinguish genuine stakeholders whose cooperation you require from spectators who merely observe. Share generously with the former, guardedly with the latter. A stakeholder possesses legitimate need for information because their actions directly impact your endeavor. All others are spectators, however well-meaning. Until a project reaches perhaps 80% completion, discuss it only with essential collaborators. After that threshold, momentum makes external opinions less dangerous. The train moves too fast for obstacles to derail it. Some contexts reward openness, brainstorming with trusted team, consultation with genuine experts. Others punish it mercilessly, casual conversation with acquaintances, social gatherings where curiosity masquerades as interest. Match disclosure to context with precision. Master responses that acknowledge questions without revealing substance. It proceeds. I shall show you when complete. I'm exploring various approaches. Why do you ask? These maintain relationships whilst protecting advantage. Practice them until they flow naturally as breath. If withholding information would violate obligations or harm relationships, providing genuine value, share appropriately. The principle is discrimination, not universal secrecy. Neither hermit nor broadcaster B become the sovereign actor who speaks when speaking serves. Create two lists: strategic communication situations and vain explanation situations. For 1 week, classify every communication impulse into one category or the other. Strategic might include coordinate with business partner on timeline, seek editor's feedback on completed chapter, Direct team on project requirements. Vain might include: tell friend about book I'm planning. Explain business idea at dinner party. Seek validation from colleague about strategy. Simply categorizing your impulses creates awareness. You'll discover that perhaps 70% of your communication urges fall into the vain explanation category. Armed with this awareness, you can consciously redirect that energy toward execution instead. For 7 days, before any communication about your work, pause and classify it as either strategic or vain. Keep a tally. Strategic communications proceed. Vain explanations get deflected. At week's end, calculate the percentage of each. Most discover vain explanation dominates overwhelmingly. The mere act of classification dramatically reduces vain explanation. Awareness itself changes behavior. You cannot classify communication as vain and then proceed with it unconsciously. The contradiction proves psychologically impossible. The primary error is applying this principle mechanically, creating arbitrary rules rather than developing judgment. The goal is discrimination, not isolation. Another mistake: confusing strategic communication with any communication about work. Merely discussing work doesn't make it strategic. Only communication that advances purposes qualifies. Finally, recognize that some strategic communication today prevents vain explanation tomorrow. Setting clear boundaries, I don't discuss projects until completion, is strategic communication that reduces future explanation demands. After this chapter, you possess the conceptual framework to evaluate every communication impulse. You no longer speak reflexively, you speak strategically. You distinguish between sharing that serves your purposes and sharing that serves only your ego. This discrimination transforms your communication from scattered, energy-draining activity into focused, purpose-driven behavior. You speak less, but accomplish more. Others perceive this shift as increased gravitas, enhanced credibility, mysterious depth. The art of deflection, what to actually say. When others demand explanation of your affairs, you possess options beyond complete revelation or outright lies. This chapter provides specific verbal techniques, the precise phrases and approaches that maintain necessary relationships whilst protecting your strategic advantage. You will learn 4 primary deflection categories: the acknowledgement without substance, the postponement, the partial truth, and the confident redirection. Each serves different circumstances and relationships. Mastering these techniques eliminates the false dilemma between revealing everything or appearing secretive. You can be simultaneously cordial and strategically discreet. During my years writing Marlborough, His Life and Times, countless acquaintances inquired about my progress. The work consumed years of research and composition. Had I explained my interpretations of each battle, my analysis of each political maneuver, I should have spent more time discussing the book than writing it. Instead, I developed standard responses that became almost reflexive. It proceeds steadily. I shall be pleased to send you a copy when published. The archives yield interesting material. These phrases acknowledge their interest whilst revealing nothing substantial. I remained cordial, even warm, but offered no fodder for extended discussion. This discipline protected thousands of hours that would otherwise have been wasted in explanation. The book eventually spoke for itself, with authority no advance explanation could have generated. The acknowledgement deflection acknowledges the question without providing substance for discussion. It proceeds, making steady progress. Moving forward, the questioner feels heard. You reveal nothing actionable. The exchange concludes quickly, amicably. The postponement technique sets boundary while honoring relationship. I shall show you when complete. You'll be the first to know when it's finished. I prefer to present completed work. This communicates your practice without suggesting secrecy. The partial truth method provides technically accurate information that reveals nothing specific, exploring various approaches, considering several possibilities. In the research phase, honesty without revelation, the listener receives answer but gains no advantage. The confident redirection turns the question back upon the questioner. Why do you ask? What makes you curious about this? This often reveals whether they have legitimate reason to know or merely curiosity. If mere curiosity, they typically retreat. If genuine stake, they explain, and you can then evaluate appropriate disclosure. Enthusiastic vagueness conveys energy without content. Quite fascinating developments. intriguing possibilities emerging, rather excited about certain aspects. This satisfies social obligation without substantive disclosure. The warmth of delivery matters more than the emptiness of content. For repeated questioners who press beyond initial deflection, set explicit boundary. I've made it a practice not to discuss projects until completion. I find it helps me maintain focus. This establishes expectation for future interactions. Most, respect, the clarity. Select 3 deflection phrases that feel natural to your temperament and circumstance. Practice them until they flow effortlessly, without rehearsal stiffness. When someone asks about your work tomorrow, employ one. Notice how the conversation proceeds differently than when you provide detailed explanations. The questioner typically accepts the deflection and moves to other topics they were seeking brief exchange, not genuine understanding. If they press for details, this reveals deeper interest. Evaluate then whether they're genuine stakeholder or merely insistent curiosity. For mere curiosity, repeat your deflection with slight rephrasing. For legitimate stakeholders, consider strategic partial disclosure. The key is responding from conscious choice rather than reflexive revelation. Write down 3 deflection phrases for each category: acknowledgement, postponement, partial truth, redirection. Practice saying them aloud until they sound natural rather than rehearsed. Then, for 2 weeks, use only these prepared phrases when questioned about unfinished work. Journal about results. How did others respond? Did conversations feel uncomfortable or surprisingly smooth? Most discover deflection proves far easier than anticipated. The feared awkwardness rarely materializes. The primary error is delivering deflections in tone, suggesting secrecy or irritation. The art lies in remaining warm, even enthusiastic, whilst revealing nothing substantial. Your manner should say, "I'm delighted you're interested," even as your words provide no information. Another mistake: using identical deflection for every questioner. Match response to relationship. Close allies merit more substance than casual acquaintances. Finally, never deflect with those who have legitimate need for information to help you. After this chapter, you possess verbal tools previously lacking. You no longer feel cornered by questions about your work. You can maintain cordial relationships whilst protecting your advantage. The question, "What are you working on?" no longer triggers anxiety or automatic over-explanation. You respond confidently with prepared phrases, redirecting conversations smoothly. This newfound verbal competence makes strategic silence sustainable in social contexts. The neuroscience of premature satisfaction. Your brain's reward system contains a design flaw with catastrophic consequences for those who fail to recognize it. The mechanism cannot distinguish between planning and doing. Discussing your novel triggers similar dopamine release as actually writing it. This satisfied state then reduces motivation for the actual work. You've received the psychological payoff prematurely. The reward system, fooled by the discussion, believes the work is done. Motivation evaporates like morning mist. The consequence: endless planning, endless discussion, minimal execution. This chapter reveals the neurological mechanism behind this phenomenon and provides techniques to circumvent it. Understanding this transforms your relationship with discussion itself. You recognize that every word about unfinished work purchases momentary pleasure at the cost of future achievement. The trade is ruinous. I observed a colleague of considerable literary talent spend 10 years working on a novel. At every social gathering, he eloquently described his plot, his characters, his themes. The narrative arc he outlined was sophisticated. The character development he described was nuanced. His passion was evident, his vision compelling. Yet the novel never materialized. Why? Because he experienced the satisfaction of authorship through description rather than through writing. The dopamine hit he received from explaining his novel to admirers provided enough pleasure to remove the ache that should have driven him to his desk each morning. He talked himself satisfied and wondered why motivation never came. The explanation itself had murdered the work. The work existed fully in his mind and in countless conversations, but never on the page. This I have witnessed repeatedly, the inverse correlation between discussion and execution. Your brain releases dopamine, the motivation neurotransmitter, in response to both planning and achieving. This system evolved in an environment where planning and doing occurred close together. You planned the hunt, then hunted. The interval was hours, not months. Modern world allows endless planning without doing, creating satisfaction without achievement. The neurological system designed for immediate action becomes corrupted by extended deliberation. Keep yourself hungry by denying counterfeit satisfaction. Each time you resist explaining your project, you preserve and intensify the desire that fuels execution. This accumulated hunger becomes irresistible creative force. The pressure builds like steam in an engine. Release it through execution, not explanation. Many believe discussing plans relieves pressure helpfully. I tell you the reverse is true. Discussing plans releases the pressure that should drive action. You want that pressure building, demanding release through execution, not dissipating through explanation. The discomfort you feel is not signal to explain, but signal to work. Celebrate only completed stages, never planned stages. This trains your reward system correctly. Pleasure follows achievement, not intention. Over time, the neurological pathway rewires. You become psychologically incapable of satisfaction from mere planning. When you feel compulsion to discuss a project, physically redirect that energy. If you would have spent 30 minutes explaining your plans, spend those 30 minutes working on the project instead. Make this substitution conscious and deliberate. Feel the energy that would have gone towards speech flowing into action. This physical redirection teaches at a level deeper than intellectual understanding. After several such redirections, you develop almost physical aversion to premature discussion, not from discipline, but from experiential understanding that explanation costs concrete progress. Tomorrow, when you feel the urge to discuss an unfinished project, set a timer for however long that discussion would have consumed, even if just 10 minutes. Spend that exact time working on the project instead. The shift from external control to internal alignment marks genuine transformation. You no longer resist the urge to explain, you genuinely prefer working. For 21 days, 3 full weeks, completely abstain from discussing unfinished work. This is extended fast from premature satisfaction. You will feel increased pressure, heightened desire, almost physical need to create. This is precisely the state you want hunger channeled toward execution. Keep daily journal noting motivation levels. Most discover that by day 14 to 21, motivation reaches intensity they've never experienced. This hunger, properly preserved and directed, produces breakthrough productivity. Some confuse this teaching with suppressing all discussion of work. Not so. The principle concerns unfinished work. Once you complete significant milestones, appropriate celebration follows naturally. Another mistake, forcing yourself into isolation that feels punishing. The goal is strategic redirection, not joyless solitude. If you feel persistently miserable rather than productively hungry, you've misapplied the principle. Finally, recognize that occasional lapses are inevitable. Resume practice without self-condemnation. After this chapter, you understand the neurological mechanism underlying your compulsion to explain. You recognize this urge not as healthy communication impulse, but as neurological glitch, your brain seeking premature reward. This knowledge itself provides power over the mechanism. You can now distinguish between genuine need to communicate and neurotransmitter-driven craving for counterfeit satisfaction. This distinction transforms behavior at neurological level, not merely through willpower. The 5 stages of character transformation. Transformation unfolds in predictable stages, each with characteristic challenges and breakthroughs. This chapter maps the complete journey from first awareness to natural mastery, recognition, practice, struggle, breakthrough, and natural expression. Understanding this progression prevents discouragement during inevitable difficulties. The reader who grasps these stages recognizes that struggle indicates progress, not failure. The internal resistance you feel signals that deep patterns are being rewritten. This chapter provides roadmap for the transformation ahead, allowing you to navigate each stage with understanding rather than stumbling through in confusion. During the war's darkest days, I made decisions affecting millions, decisions that could not be submitted to committee or popular vote. This sovereign action did not emerge suddenly but developed over decades through disciplined practice. I had integrated the principle of strategic discretion so thoroughly that even under extreme pressure, I decided in the silence of conscience and necessity. This was not technique, but character. Decades of practice had fused wisdom with identity. The stages were visible in retrospect. Early recognition during youth, conscious practice during wilderness years, struggle against self-doubt and external pressure, breakthrough with war leadership, finally, natural expression. Stage 1. Recognition occupies roughly weeks 1 and 2 of your journey. You become aware of how much energy you currently waste in premature explanation. The task here is merely observation without judgment. You're building data about your current pattern. Simply notice each time you discuss unfinished work, count the instances, calculate the time consumed. Most critical insight: awareness itself begins changing behavior. You cannot observe a pattern without beginning to alter it. Stage 2 practice extends from weeks 3 through 8. You deliberately apply new behavior, keeping projects private, deflecting questions, redirecting energy to execution. This feels effortful, unnatural, uncomfortable. You'll catch yourself halfway through explanations and have to stop mid-sentence. This awkwardness is normal, necessary, temporary. You're learning new skill. All new skills feel forced initially. Accept the discomfort as evidence of learning. Stage 3. Struggle runs from weeks 9 through 16. This is the crucial period where most abandon the practice. The old pattern fights back with surprising force. You'll encounter social pressure from friends questioning your secrecy. You'll experience internal resistance moments where you doubt whether this discretion is worth the effort. This is the stage that separates those who transform from those who merely experiment, push through. The struggle indicates you're rewriting deep patterns. If it were easy, everyone would do it. The difficulty is what makes the transformation valuable. Stage 4 breakthrough arrives around week 17 through 20. You complete a significant project in silence and present finished work. Others respond with respect, rather than the skepticism that greeted your past announcements. You experience directly the power of accomplished facts. This success reinforces new pattern more powerfully than any argument or exhortation could. You taste the fruit of strategic silence. The lesson imprints deeply because it comes from direct experience, not instruction. Stage 5, natural expression, begins around week 21 and continues thereafter. Strategic silence becomes default behavior. You no longer deliberate about each. Communication judgment flows naturally as breathing. You've achieved integration. The practice has become character. Identify which stage you currently occupy. If in stage 1, focus only on observation, no pressure to change yet. Build awareness systematically. If in stage 2, expect effort and awkwardness. This is appropriate for this stage, not evidence of failure. If in stage 3, remind yourself that resistance indicates progress, not futility. If approaching stage 4, deliberately create opportunity for breakthrough by completing and presenting significant work. Understanding your stage prevents inappropriate expectations. Many abandon practice because they expect stage 5 results while still in stage 2. Realistic expectations based on stage progression sustain commitment through the difficult middle period. For 30 days, journal daily about your experience with strategic silence. Note which stage you occupy, specific challenges faced, small victories achieved, moments of backsliding. Review weekly to assess progression. This journaling serves two purposes. It provides objective data about your movement through stages, and the act of reflection itself accelerates transformation. Most complete the 5-stage progression in 20 to 30 weeks with consistent practice. The primary error is expecting linear progression. Stages overlap, you may regress temporarily. Breakthrough can arrive sooner or later than predicted. Another mistake, judging yourself harshly for backsliding. Everyone explains something they shouldn't multiple times during transformation. The measure is trend, not perfection. Finally, don't rush stages. Each serves necessary function. Trying to force natural expression before completing practice and struggle produces brittle behavior that collapses under pressure. After this chapter, you possess a roadmap for your transformation. You understand where you are, where you're going, and what to expect at each stage. This removes mystery and reduces discouragement. You recognize struggle as progress indicator, not failure signal. You can assess your advancement objectively. Most important, you understand that the destination, natural expression, is genuinely achievable through sustained practice, not reserved for uniquely disciplined individuals.